This episode is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is the #1 tool for all podcasters. You can record high-fidelity audio between remote locations and get studio-quality sound. Go to Zencastr.com and use coupon code THATENTERTAINS for 20% off for 3 months or 20% off an annual plan.
Everything is Awesome is part of Courts and Parts, a podcast network featuring pop culture, TV, movie, and geek podcasts. Check out some of our other shows, like TV Ate My Brain, Let's Chat with Revelin Friends, and Podstalgic at courtsandparts.com.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. 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 That was awesome. You guys are awesome. No, you're awesome. You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kevin. This is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And I am very excited for this week's episode. But before we get there, just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to remind everybody that we could use your support to help spread the good word of awesome. You can support us in several different ways. One of the best ways to support us to help us do bigger and better things is patreon.com/thatentertains. I promise that will be updated by the time the Philadelphia Podcast Festival comes around. But that Patreon helps cover hosting fees, and as it continues to grow, it will help cover emergency funds for all the podcasts on the that'sentertainment.com or thatentertains.com podcast network. It will help us go tour, do more panels at conventions, and just do more cool things and bring on shows and pay our talent and stuff like that. So that Patreon is very, very important, but it's not the only important thing. Obviously, we live at a time where maybe spending money on a podcast isn't something you can do. Supporting us for $1 is cheaper than a cup of coffee, but if you can't do it, I understand. So you can always leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Those help us climb the charts and get more ears in front of this podcast so that we can, again, organically grow our audience and do bigger and cooler things. And, of course, word of mouth recommendations. I'm going to try to get through our housekeeping today because we have a big packed show, but I got to talk about the Philadelphia Podcast Festival. That's right. The Philly Podcast Fest is coming back for the 6th year in 2018, and it kicks off on June 22nd at Good Comedy with Eavesdropping on America. You can go to phillypodfest.com/schedule for the full schedule, but here is just a sample of the lineup. On the 23rd is when the first weekend really gets into gear at Tattoo Moms. You have A Quest for Magic and Steel, Poppin' Bottles, and Dissecting the 80s. Amalgam Comics and Coffee House, one of my favorite spots in the city. You have All My Fantasy Children with Jeff Stormer, voice of Free Planet X, and Victims and Villains, among many other shows. You also have shows going on at Fit that day with We Got This. And then the next day, June 24th at T-Moms, you have the Broad Street Live, you have American Immigrant, you have Alt Black, Red Cap's Corner, which I believe is new to the festival this year as far as a venue is concerned. We'll be hosting Party of One. Again, Jeff Stormer kicking it up that weekend. It's an all Jeff weekend. The following weekend kicks off on the 29th at the Rubik Club with My Gay Agenda, Sarah and Andrea Share a Smile, and Sex with Mary. And then on the 30th at Tattooed Moms, we have two of my favorite podcasts, Doom Thugs, really good podcast from Delco. Love those guys. #1 podcast in Delco, mind you. And of course, Blacklisted with my boy Nubius Black and Chaos, my boys, I should say. My old wrestling pals do a podcast called Blacklisted. So check that out on the 30th. And then the last day, July 1st at Tattooed Moms. At 1 p.m., Everything is Awesome kicks off the last day of the festival, and the last day of the festival is packed with some amazing, amazing shows. I've already mentioned Everything is Awesome, and then it just gets better from there. Full Belly Laughs, Nerd with Words, and so many more. It's going to be a great festival this year. I'm really excited. It's a little bit of a tighter schedule this year. not as packed, and it's just it's so many venues across the board that are there, beyond what I mentioned, and it's just it continues to grow, and I really love this festival. I'm glad that I get to be part of it. I'm glad that I get to help run it. I was only available one day this year, but Philadelphia Podcast Fest. Go to phillypodfest.com/schedule for the complete schedule, but make sure you support all the shows that you can, and especially come support us at Tattooed Moms on July 1st from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. We're kicking things off, and I'll probably be hanging out the whole day there. This week's guest, BJ Mendelson. What a amazing guest that I had to. He started following me on Twitter for some random reason, and I followed him back. And then eventually, like months later, I started like looking at his tweets and then looking at his website, and I was like, oh, I gotta have this guy on the show. He's an author, he's a speaker, a writer, a creator. A mall Santa? More on that in the show. We talk social media and technology, including gaming. I'm not going to keep you from the show any longer. Here is my conversation with the one and only BJ. So you are an author, speaker, and a self-proclaimed mall Santa, according to your website.
That's right.
But I want to. The speaking thing interests me because I also saw some podcasts on your site, and obviously I'm interested in that as well. But it sounds like I would have to guess, just based off of the what I saw on your site. I would guess you put yourself as writer first.
Well, mall Santa always. But yeah, probably author/writer first. Speaker is usually last, in whatever combination they put it in.
So let's start with your origin point with writing. Where did that interest, or when did that interest start?
Well, I came from like a typically dysfunctional household. Dad wasn't around, mom wasn't available. So I needed some sort of creative outlet for all my teenage angst. And in my case, writing was it. And I just kept at it. And I had some early success during back before social media. There used to be these sites that would just link out to like all sorts of content. And I had some early success with that, writing stuff like the Universal Breakup Card, which was featured on Boing Boing. And that blew up. And so I just kept at it. And I found that I fell ass backwards into some writing success early on and never stopped.
So, and you started writing before the grand social media experiment that I guess we're still kind of going through with all these different social media things. Did that help? Because I know, and you'll have to help me with the title here, because I just kind of curiously saw it on the website, but you wrote a book about social media and kind of its maybe false promises.
Yeah. So what I found is I've been putting stuff out on the internet since about 1998. And I've been doing advising and consulting with different companies like Ogilvy and Sears, back when Sears was the thing, and Sprint and a few others in that time. So I kind of have that perspective of the internet before, what we call social media, and the internet after. And really what the book is about is that not much has changed. The only thing that changed was we had basically this group of assholes come out of nowhere, and they were like, wow, social media is this new and amazing thing, and it'll make you rich beyond your wildest dream. It'll give you the voice equal to that of like a CNN. And so the book was kind of like, well, let's calm down here. These tools can be great, but they don't work the way that we often think that they do.
Yeah, well, and it's because I was thinking about this the other day about how like the internet like the face of it at least has changed. Like, and, I grew up with the internet. I was born in '84, so like, I grew up with computers and technology. As it aged, I aged with it, and I think I'm finally kind of hitting the point where maybe it's aging beyond me and it's getting too advanced for me. But the kids today, all they know really is social media, but something that like they're not getting the chat room experience that like AOL brought us back in the 90s. And is that like the quote unquote social media of like the origin point, I guess?
Well, I think the biggest difference. So I'm a year
Okay.
older than you. I was born in '83, and so yeah, I had computers in the classroom, and I had the internet really early on. So I was ashamed to admit that when like the Nashville Predators were put into the NHL as an expansion team, I had the internet, and I was stupidly excited about it. I have no idea why. Because I'm not a Predators fan and I'm not from Nashville, but I was really excited because I guess they had one of the first team websites. So I think the biggest difference between now and then is that it's
Okay.
portable and you actually have it in your pocket. You could take out your phone, and fewer and fewer people are actually using a laptop and are actually using a desktop computer unless they need it for work. Or if you're like me and you're a writer, you need the keyboard and you don't quite trust like the iPad Pro or the Surface keyboards for whatever reason. So that's really the only significant I can't talk today change. And I'll give you a great example of that. So Facebook behind the scenes is really no different than MySpace, which is no different than Friendster, which is no different than Classmates.com. So I mean, these social networks have existed almost as long as the web has. Wikimedia has existed as a company and organization almost as long as the web has. So nothing has really quite changed except that we can experience it without needing the computer.
And that's something that myself I'm guilty of like having my phone out probably when I shouldn't, and just today's generation just kind of being right in the having it right in their face, and I do agree. Like I prefer a laptop over a tablet, but like even business, I guess depends on the business, but like the place I work at is. Right. Like they came to me and say, hey, can you find out what it's going to be to get a whole bunch of Surface Pros? And I'm like, come on, guys, like that's not what we need. And maybe that's just the curmudgeon in me, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's like a weird cycle of everything. Everyone wants something smaller and more portable, but then like when you give that to them, they like with phones, for instance, everyone wanted smaller phones 15 years ago, and now like if you don't have a phablet or whatever they call the phone tablets, they're right. Up in arms.
Yeah, it seems it's going in the other direction now. Because we're at the point where everyone from our generation, I hate
yeah.
the term millennial, because I think that there's a big difference between kids that were born in like 83, 84, 85, and then kids that were born in 92, 93, 94. But yet we're all lumped together as like this one big group. And so, yeah, everything has gone backwards to wanting the tablet-sized phone. Now you have AR and VR where you got to have the headset and all the gear that goes with that. So the experience, even if it's not like a specific computer, you're wearing all this gear on you in order to be like fully immersed within VR, AR. So it's funny how it works. But I found that, I have a 2013 MacBook Air, and I have absolutely no reason to buy anything new. Because it does everything that I could possibly need it to do. Because we've gotten to the point where it doesn't matter how big the device is, the internet is right there, and you can play with it and access all the things you want. I think the only thing you can't really do on your phone successfully or do well is download porn.
It's it's funny you mentioned the generational thing, because I've had a hard time like understanding how I'm a millennial myself, because like while I grew up with technology, I still remember all the analog stuff too. And I read an article somewhere that someone coined this neat phrase that puts us right in between Gen Xers and millennials called Zennials. And I think that makes sense. Like, I mean, yes. I don't really care for the name, but like if it's finally like a nice group that separates us out from these young kids out there, because it's like for me, I'm again, I mentioned it earlier, I'm at that age where I start to not understand certain things, like Snapchat as a social media thing. I've never understood it, and it's like one of the big things that all the kids are using, right. So all these new. And I guess, it's the same way as like my uncle, who is, 16 years older than me. Like he knew like AOL chat rooms and Classmates maybe and whatnot. And then when Facebook and Twitter came around, he was, all right, that scares me. I'm out. And that's how I am about like all the new like Snapchats. And I don't even know what is out there as far as social media, aside from like the big three, Facebook, Twitter, and for me, LinkedIn is like the third big one.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly those. Snapchat, less and less so. Instagram is always popular, although people don't realize it's owned by Facebook. And,
Yeah.
you got stuff like House Party. So just to give you an idea of how big that difference is between people all in the millennial group, I was going out with this girl who's 10 years younger than me. And we both liked the Goo Goo Dolls, and we were listening to the music. And one of the songs came on. I said, "Oh, I remember when this came out." And she turned to me and she's like, "Yeah, I was 8." So just to get like that, and we're all part of the same generation technically.
Yeah.
So, typically when you think of people that are in the same generation, you share musical tastes and things like that. But I think that Zennial is probably a more accurate term. I think that the biggest difference between us on the older end and the millennial, the actual millennials on the younger end, is they're more comfortable without using a keyboard.
Yeah.
What made Snapchat and Instagram so popular is you don't need a keyboard; it's all visual. It's just taking a picture and then altering it in some way, and so they've become really comfortable with that. And I found, I mentioned this the other day to someone, where you got to remember, New York City at the turn of the 1900s was chocked full with horse shit.
Mhm.
There was horses everywhere because that was the primary mode of transportation. And then one day, some asshole comes along and they're driving a car, and you had the entire generation of people who grew up with a horse, and that was what they were accustomed to. That had no idea what this thing was, and there was not like a ton of roads either back then, so they would just drive it all over the place. And yeah, I think every group goes through that, where there's just a moment where they're kind of like, all right, this is a little beyond me. But I try real hard to stay up with things. I'm pretty current with what XR, which is just a joint term for augmented reality and virtual reality,
Okay.
which is probably going to be the big thing going forward.
Yeah, and virtual reality, and I guess I don't know. I guess maybe it's a combination. No, I guess it's just virtual reality. That was something that like I thought I was going to be like, nope, that's when I'm out. That's like video games when it's involving walking around and stuff. I'm going to be completely out of it. But up in Madame Tussauds Wax House, at least I don't know if it's still there, but they had the Ghostbusters VR, the Void
Right.
game, and it was actually like it was the first VR experience I've had where I was like, oh, this is something that I can, like, maybe when I am an old man, I'll still be playing the new whatever the new thing for video games is, and it is a like the Star Wars. I don't know the name of the app, but the hollow chess that was part of it, where you need the whole headgear to play it. They finally made it to where you just need your phone. So like and that I guess is more augmented reality because it's you just throw it on like your own tabletop. And it is like that is while I still prefer my console gaming, that's like a neat I guess I don't know if it's going to be a fad, but the next step, the next generation of gaming, it is kind of neat to see that that's, going to be for someone. Maybe not my go-to, but it's going to be there.
Well, what's hilarious is that even VR is a very old technology. Like it dates back to the 50s.
Oh, wow.
So it's not anything new. It's just that the technology has I mean, when we were kids, there was virtual reality. We had the
I remember the
Nintendo Virtual Boy.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. There was the Virtual Boy. There was a couple arcade games that used holograms, which is basically augmented reality. So for people at home to tell the difference, this is reductive, but if it's a completely enclosed experience where you're wearing a headset, it's virtual reality. If it's something where you're interacting with your environment, it's augmented reality. And I know there's a few nerds that I'm friends with that will fight me over that description, but that's the difference between the two. And eventually what'll happen is it'll just sort of be the same headset that you switch back and forth. And so, I don't think that I don't find that I'm going to have the experience that my dad did, because he grew up with like Pong, right? And the Atari 2600. And I remember he was able to play games up until the PlayStation. And then once the PlayStation came out, he's like, there's too many buttons and I can't keep up with it. So I'm hopeful that won't happen with these technologies.
Well, and I mean, really, with those technologies, at least the VRs and the ARs, it seems like there's less buttons. Like if that's the worry, it's they're not I mean, it is strange that they still found a way to go from like the first generation PlayStation to the second and third generation, adding more buttons. uh the extra like I forget what they are because I'm now an Xbox guy, so I forget, but like
Right.
it's they were able to add buttons from PS1 to I remember there being more buttons, and
I mean, just look at the Xbox 360 controller compared to like a PlayStation
mhm,
1 controller.
yeah.
You know, you got the analog switches on there and the extra shoulder buttons. It's I can understand like it's intense. If you were not a gamer, and I were to take an Xbox controller and put it in front of you, I could see people kind of like
And
freaking out a bit.
it's definitely like changed the way how I think first person shooters operate. Like I used to love GoldenEye, and I think everyone has loved GoldenEye. And that
Yeah.
was like a game where I was at least on an equal playing field with, let's say, 90% of my friends, and I had a couple that were just way too good. But as you've added more buttons and whatnot to these games, like I'm on the bottom rung of first person shooters because you just have to have like the reaction time and the mindset to be, I guess, know what the hell you're doing. And I like the last I think one I played was like Call of Duty 2 or something. And like I liked it. I was good enough, but not great. And it doesn't seem like it's too crazy. But I've played some where I'm like, I just got like all I'm doing is dying. Like if I play multiplayer, I just die every single time. It's no longer fun to be that guy.
Yeah, no, this is why I'm a supporter of Major League Gaming, because I do think that it's a highly developed skill set
Oh yeah.
that those guys have, where you know it's not so easy to get the timing down and the mindset, and just your hand eye coordination has to be as good as a professional athlete in some cases. So yeah, it's kind of crazy that where there's definitely a divide between people that you know have the Xbox as their Xbox One as like their first system versus people who had like the PlayStation as their first system who are trying to catch up. I know that my niece, she's 4 now, but she could probably wipe the floor with me with an Xbox when she gets old enough to have one.
Yeah, it is my I have a son who is 6 and my daughter who is will be 4 soon, and you know, he's just kind of figuring it out, and like able to like play the game. Like I feel like when you're a kid, the biggest obstacle to a game is kind of the 3D landscape of it all, where you know I think like naturally almost like my kids seem to want to play a 2D scrolling game like a regular Mario because he was like way more successful at that than he was at say Assassin's Creed.
Right.
And now he can play Assassin's Creed and be able to navigate the world without too much of an issue. Every now and then he gets a little lost. But yeah, I mean, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I guess when I mean, I don't know I guess the first game I really remember is probably Mario, but like there was literally 4 directions. I guess really only 3 directions you could go unless you count falling as down. So you know when the games you know that I started out with, you only had to know like maybe at most like a 2 or 3 button combination to do a series of moves, and now it's like I don't know. You could probably get up to like a 10 button combination to successfully do one move, and that's what these kids are growing up with.
Yeah, I mean, if you Mortal Kombat's a great example of that. If you want to do a fatality in Mortal Kombat 1 with Scorpion, it was block up up. But now, if you look at whatever the current version of it, there's at least like 7 different buttons and motions you need to make in order to pull it off.
Yeah, and Mortal Kombat again. That's another great example of a game that, like the early series, I loved and I was able to play. And I guess maybe fighting games in general, I was able to play. I was good at. You know, you didn't have to do too much to pull off like an epic move. And now, as you said, it's almost near impossible for me to do it because I just don't have the patience. Like the reason Telltale games exist are for people like me who like just want to have that story interaction and be able to like kind of shape it by pressing 2 or 3 buttons.
Yeah, I think that they certainly, I mean, that's definitely an underserved audience in the gaming market, is that there's a lot of people our age who would very much like simplified controls and a good story. And I just don't see a lot of content out there beyond what they do.
Well, and that's why I think like the NES Classic and the SNES Classic were so like such big hits, is that they were
Right.
straight up catering to us.
Yeah, those devices have a couple of downsides to them. You don't have wireless controls for that was to me the biggest one is that I had to sit as close to the TV
Yeah.
as I possibly could, which brought me back to the old days, right? Because that's how you
Yeah.
had to do it. But you're right. I think those things did so well because there was all that pent up demand. I mean, gaming is a rough industry to turn a profit in. So I totally understand why they're targeting like teenagers who are getting their parents' money to pay $60, $70 for a game, whereas you got people our age who are like, we've got money, but why don't we have any games to play with?
Yeah. And I mean, and I guess, for as you're an adult, it's also time. Like for me, time is the big factor is why I don't,
Right.
I could buy all these games and they just end up sitting on my entertainment center for a year. Like I want to say, it's, I think Final Fantasy 13 and Skyrim are two games that I got relatively close to the release, or I got as gifts relatively close to the release, and they're still sitting on my shelf wrapped. Like
Right.
I have, and they've been out for years. So, yeah, gaming is definitely, I think I want to say a young person's game, but it's definitely it's not a parent's game. If you're a parent, it's really hard to game until your kid's old enough to do it with you.
Well, I mean, that's why Nintendo was so successful. So, like, when I was first starting out, I was a game journalist for this company called
Okay.
UWire, which was later bought by CBS. And so, like, I had the Wii a month before
Oh,
anyone else
nice.
did. And I was like, okay, I understand that you don't need to know anything. Like, my grandmother can, and in a couple cases did know how to operate
Yeah.
the games for the Wii. And so that's why I think that Nintendo does as well as they do is they realize that Sony and Microsoft don't, for financial reasons, they really can't make all the games for everybody. They got to focus on 2 or 3 AAA titles, and everything else just sort of falls by the wayside. And Nintendo was like, no, we're for everybody. This is why we're awesome. And they've certainly fucked up here and there. The Wii U is a good example, but the Switch is exactly what
Yeah.
we're talking about, where it's simplified and everyone can pick it up. And
Well,
play
and
with it.
I did end up buying a Wii U, and honestly, it was probably the worst. And I bought it like after, like I knew better. Like I didn't think they were going to come out with another system anytime soon. And I mean, I've had it, and I haven't gotten my Switch yet, but I'm gonna probably by summer's end, I'll pick one up. But the Wii U, like I've played it very rarely. It's actually more of a system for the kids now because it's a little bit simpler, especially for my 4-year-old, where they can just pick it up and play. Even the newer Mario, they make side scrolling with 3D effects or whatever. But yeah, the Wii U was I guess a misstep. But the Switch is such a genius move for I think for like all gamers, but for like adult gamers specifically, where you maybe don't have all the time in the world to sit down and play a game, but you can just take the console with you and play it on the train, or I can sit outside at lunch and play it on my lunch break. That is like, I feel like that makes me a bigger gamer, is the ability to take the whole system with me versus like, yeah, I'd play more Xbox games if I could not play them at home.
Yeah, I think it was kind of genius in the sense that so more and more people are moving to cities. There's a statistic I think it's by 2025, 80% of the United States population will be living in the city. And those cities haven't kept up with infrastructure and improvements on mass transit. So you've got a lot of people who are spending like an hour on the F train. They get from Queens to Midtown Manhattan. And that's what I see a lot of on the subway is people that are around our age and sometimes a little younger and sometimes a little older. They're all playing Zelda. They're all playing the Switch. They all got Mario Kart. And so I think maybe Nintendo didn't quite understand, because I know people that work for their marketing department. So I don't know if it was intentional or not, but they certainly stumbled into this category of young professionals who have these really super long commutes.
Yeah.
And have nothing to occupy them with, and the Switch was perfect for that.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I want to say maybe like a friend of mine were talking about it, and the initial time, and I really haven't followed up since then, but like it was marketed as, hey, this console that also happens to be portable, and it's like no, the way you market that is it's a portable system that's also a console that you just plug in
Right.
and dock, because like that, it's still, to my understanding, doesn't have the power of its competitors. So
Yeah, not even close.
yeah, so if you're trying to compare it as a console, it's going to lose. But as a portable handheld system, it's beyond its anything else that's out there. Like, it's better than a phone. It's yeah. I guess the other companies really don't have any handhelds anymore. Like, does Sony even make their PSP anymore? I haven't seen a new one.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think that they've abandoned it because they did Vita, and then I think that they've kind of left it alone. But I mean, for me, the Switch has replaced the phone. It hasn't replaced the iPad because I watch movies on that when I'm flying. But any game that I was playing on the phone is now completely secondary to whatever I can get on the Switch.
Yeah, and I'll, I would say the same thing would happen or will happen when I get my Switch, because I'll play a game on my phone and it might last a week or two before, like, all right, unless I'm A, paying money, or B, I'm okay with just literally doing the same thing over and over again. It loses its value, and I will never pay for fake money. Like, I'm not that guy where I'm like, hey, let me pay $100 for 100 coins to get further in this game. So the Switch is a 100% replacement for, I think, the mobile gamer. And if you're like, if you're like me, where the only time I really get to play games is like on my phone. Oh God, that Switch is a lifesaver, and I can't wait to have my hands on it now. Like, I feel like I should pick it up tonight after this conversation.
And think of it this way: the money that you save on data,
Yeah,
that you're expending on the phone could be saved if you switched over to the Switch.
Yeah, exactly. It is a neat thing that Nintendo stumbled upon, and I actually I can't imagine what they would do after the Switch, like, because that's something that I had always said, prior to the Switch, it would be great if you could just take these high end games with you on the go. Like, I think that's the one thing that PlayStation and Sony kind of did, where you were like, with certain games, you were able to, like Final Fantasy VII, for instance, I believe you were able to like sync it to your PSP. And I never tried this theory, but there was some weird setting that lets you do it. And I was like, oh, that's neat. I can play this game home or on the go. And Nintendo's perfected that. So I don't know where you go from that. Like, to me, the next logical step is like more of like a universal console station that plays games from all three of the big guys.
Yeah, I think they're pushing towards that. Microsoft has, for example, kind of said, yeah, the Xbox is the Xbox, but we want to own your entire living room. We want one device to rule them all. And the only way to get to that point is going to be Sony and Nintendo and Microsoft just putting the stuff out on one console. It'll get there eventually. I don't think that, just with the general trend of, people have an Apple TV in their house, or they have the Amazon Fire or the Google Chromecast, that the only killer app that they have that those other things don't have is the games.
Yeah.
So any chance that these companies kind of make money. I mean, Sega did it, where we saw Sega almost completely leave hardware. I mean, I know they have a Genesis Classic that's like coming out, but aside from that, they just said we're going to make software and we're going to play it out on every device, and that's sort of going to be it. So sooner or later we'll get there.
Yeah, and I think the Xbox is the kind of the way to go. And I don't have a PS4, but just based off like the devices I have from Nintendo, Xbox, and Sony, Xbox One being the newest one, like it makes the most sense to like, hey, let's just have a Nintendo app or something like that. And and I guess really, like, if you could kind of maybe do something that's a one unit for your entire living room, but they can also, take what the Switch does and you can somehow bring it with you on the go. Like, that would be the perfect marriage of those systems.
Yeah, I think the technology is almost there too. Like, I was just thinking, if you could have a portable Xbox One experience, that would be fantastic. They're a few years away from that for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's generally the direction it will go, and it should be pretty interesting to see.
And again, I think although you shouldn't maybe have your face in front of a device all day long, in a world where, if your phone's like, for me, and I drive to work. I live in the suburbs, so I don't have to deal with Philly transit at all. But like anytime I do, all I'm doing is I'm rarely playing a game on my phone. Sometimes I might, but I'm usually wasting time on Facebook or Twitter, or maybe even, and maybe you won't, maybe some people won't call this a waste of time, but maybe I'm reading some stupid article or something. That's the portability of a real video game system, whether it be the Switch or like a portable Xbox One or something like that. It feels like it has way more value than for that hour that I'm doing nothing on Facebook versus, a video game. It's, I love as much as I hate technology, being an IT person, I do love some aspects of it, and this is it. Like I get giddy over, the fun technology, fun tech.
Yeah, I mean, and understandably so, because Facebook, I mean, there's been more than enough research that's come out over the years saying it's tied to depression. People are not presenting their true selves, and you kind of get like this warped perception of reality by just scrolling through your newsfeed or on Instagram, scrolling through your feed on there. And so we've seen more than enough negative effects of just immersing yourself in social media versus gaming, where we found the exact opposite. We found that it's regenerative, it's restorative, it's good for your brain, it's good for your eyes, it's good for your hand-eye coordination, it's good for your mind, it relaxes you. So any chance that we can get for people to play games over using social media, I'm all for. And I think that we'll see that with the self-driving cars too. I think that well, eventually, I mean, it's not as close as I'm sure they want everyone to think it is, but we will get to a point where you just sit in the car and they have an entertainment system set up, and so you could have this choice of like Facebook or Mario, and I think that most people are going to go with Mario.
Oh, I mean, I think if there was a better Mario game on the iOS, that would be a game that I would play. I mean, that's the problem with that Mario game is it's just like every other iOS or Android game. It's you play it for really 15 minutes, and that's just the game you're going to end up playing for the next week if you stick to it. So self-driving cars, and maybe I'm buying into it, but doesn't Tesla like have the ability with their and I don't know if you know, but with their cars to like self pull up to your the front of your house, and like you get out at the front of your house and it will go park itself in the driveway? Or am I making that up?
Yeah, so no, I used to be an editor at a site called Wonder How To, and one of our verticals was entirely based on driverless cars. So it's more of an issue of the technology is certainly there right now. I mean, we have self-driving cars on the road in California and Arizona, despite the incident that occurred last month. There's just the car only knows what it knows, and that's sort of what the issue is. So the car knows how to parallel park because it's a simple set of tasks. The car knows how to pull into your driveway because it's relatively simple, but the car wouldn't know what to do if like a rabid Wolverine jumped down to the road and started attacking the driver in front of you. Yeah, like so that's sort of the issue that we have. And we saw that in Arizona where there was someone crossing the street, but they weren't using the crosswalk. And so the car hit them. And so that's sort of the limitation that they have right now. It's not that they don't know, but it's just that they can't account for all these different possibilities. The good news is every time there's another self-driving car on the road, they teach each other.
Oh, interesting.
Again, that's like a really reductive way to put it. And I'm sure, again, I'll get into a fight with someone who's like an engineer working in that space. But that's basically what happens is the more that these cars are out there, they're sending data to each other saying, oh, well, on this turn, you've got the probability that a deer is going to come out. So, you might want to slow down. They're not quite there yet, but I do think that we'll eventually get to that point, especially in cities. I think that if you live out in the suburbs, it's going to be a little tougher. Upstate New York, for example, is once you leave New York City and really Orange and Ulster County, it's very rural. There's a great deal of distance between a lot of things, and I think that the cars will have issues with that. Whereas if it's a tightly packed and dense road network where, the car has gone up and down it thousands of times, it knows what to account for, and we'll see it. So it is coming. I just think that they got to work out some bugs.
So what do you think would be first? Because I know there's prototypes of both of these things, the self-driving car or the flying car. Like what's going to be massively available first?
I think it'll be the flying car first, honestly. I think that the difference between the two is that you don't necessarily need the flying car to be driverless. They want it to be. I know that that's sort of the goal, is that but it doesn't have to be. And for that reason, roof space is plentiful. They already kind of have clearance because they're working with NASA. Uber is working with NASA and the FAA on it. So it's easier to implement than the self-driving car for that reason. The self-driving car really needs as much data as it can possibly get. The other thing is that it needs a high density cell phone network. We're just now getting 5G, and 5G isn't completely rolled out everywhere. It's only in certain spots. And for a self-driving car to really work, it needs high span wireless internet. Whereas, we already have planes that fly themselves. That's the secret of the airline industry. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility to have a flying car with a predetermined destination take you from one place to the next, because there's no, unless there's like a bird that gets in the way, there's really not a lot of interference that's going to happen between point A and point B.
And I mean, but for me, like a flying car, I think the whole appeal is like kind of the idea that I can actually fly this thing. And maybe that's a bad thing because like I'm not properly trained, but I feel like that's the appeal to a flying car, is like I get to have a similar experience that I've done for the last 15, 16 years or more driving. But it's in a whole new way by flying. And I'm sure it gets old. I'm sure after a year you're like, all right, I just want to do it by itself. But I feel like I would want to be in control of that flying car, a la the Jetsons.
Yeah. Well, that's what people are finding with the self-driving cars too. I think that a lot of the media coverage, because you got reporters who don't necessarily know any better, so a lot of their coverage is like self-driving cars are going to replace cars, and that's not really what's going to happen. You're going to have both. You'll have either or, and probably what we'll see is like the self-driving cars will have their own lanes. Is really the only significant difference that we'll see, and you kind of see that now. Like so I've driven all over the country, and like in LA, they've got the high occupancy vehicle lanes. That's probably what you would see happen with the self-driving cars. With the flying cars, I mean, I think most people will probably want to fly themselves, but you're going to get people who are going to just want to get behind the wheel and explore and have fun. I think it's Infinity. I might have it wrong. There's a car commercial that just came out that's playing with that idea, where they're kind of like, sure, the car can take you places, but it's not fun. Like a self-driving car doesn't know the fun of driving up the 101 or whatever the road is that connects like Los Angeles to some of the northern cities in California. It doesn't appreciate, the coast and the Pacific and the breeze. And so, you could probably just see both at the same time. And in the same way with like video games, where I don't know. I think we will have one device to kind of rule them all, but I don't know if that necessarily means you'll see like something like the Switch vanish. I think there's always going to be that option of, all right, well, that thing is for the house and that thing is for the subway. And I think people just like having options.
Yeah. Well, and I like the idea, like, for me, like as much as I, don't like driving that much anymore because, I used to do it for work all the time. I still like the idea of like going on road, like when we go out to the Poconos or something and just the scenery, that's where I like want to have I don't want to be distracted by, a self-driving car where I can just sit there and play Mario. I would want to be concentrating on the drive itself for just the scenery itself. Like my commute to work, or like my commute to a baseball game, or my commute to anywhere that's not really going to be visually that stunning. Like, oh God, please. Yeah. Just take control for me, so I don't have to do any of this.
I mean, that's sort of what I talk about in the privacy book that I just put out, where one thing doesn't replace another. They're just going to coexist. So you could have Facebook that you don't pay for and it creeps on you, and you could have Facebook where for $8 a month it doesn't creep on you. And so one doesn't replace the other. They coexist, and depending on what your needs are, that's the thing that you use. Yeah.
Now, because let's go back to your writing again, because I know like your how many like books I saw the social media one and is the privacy one the same one as the social media, or is that separate?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, two separate ones. So technically I've written 3 books.
Okay.
The third one was sort of ghost written.
Okay.
for a tech company executive, but I don't know what the status of that is. It's done. He has it. And that's sort of all I know. But there's two that are available, and one is social media is bullshit, and the other is privacy and how we get it back. So the privacy book is the new one.
And those, you know, are obviously they and I'm have to assume, based off of just our conversation, the little bit I saw, you know, your whole mall Santa gimmick, I assume there's got to be some humor based in those books. But
Oh yeah.
like looking at your site, like the first article I saw there when I popped on today, just to like make sure I was talking to the right guy, was the, you know, it looks like a very, like you're very humor based. Because you had, what was your May 1st article? I'm blanking on it. It was George Lucas, and to me, whenever anyone writes about George Lucas, it's going to be humorous. So is that like where your comfort level with writing is in like a truth but humor?
I just like stuff that's batshit crazy, but it is also honest at the same time. So I mean, social media is bullshit has a ton of jokes in it. The end of privacy. So I had to do something different with the privacy book. The print edition has fewer jokes in it because it was put out by a British publisher. And I didn't have control over the final manuscript. So what I did was I took all the jokes that were cut and put them in an audiobook over on Audible. So I highly recommend the audio version over the print edition. Both are good, but if you go to Audible, you could find the book under the end of privacy. And there's dick jokes in it, but I'm also talking about like this really serious stuff. And I found that's when you talk about technology, it's easier if you have jokes. You know, if I found that if I use the word like algorithm to a reporter, most of their eyes glaze over. And they just don't want to talk to you anymore. Like they just don't. But if you disguise it with jokes about pop brownies and Rush, you know, then all of a sudden they'll be your best friend because it's funny and they want to put out. So all my stuff, like even the comics, all have jokes in them. I really try to be as humor based as I can. I used to do stand up comedy. I'm working on getting back into it with the new book that I'm working on, and so. If you're not laughing, then you didn't get your money's worth with me.
Well, and that's the, you know, stand up has got to be, I've had a buddy who did it for a little while. It's something that like, I want to dabble in, but before I do that, like you know, as something to help me with podcasting and just doing live shows, I want to take an improv course because I just think it would be fun. But then like the step after that is I would love to go to like an open mic and just you know not care and see what happens. So when you did stand up, how long did you do
that was
stand
the
up?
first thing I ever really did
mics?
professionally.
Did you go beyond that?
I was too young. So what happened was I was too young to be booked on a lot of shows because I was even 18 at the time that I started. I think I was just turning 17, and I was like, all right, if I book out your bar for the night, can I come and do comedy? It's like, yeah, of course. Well, of course we'll take the money. So I would book these shows up and down the East Coast with all of these different local bands, and the bands would sell tickets, and so everyone would make money, and which was kind of great because you know if you're an indie band, you tend to get screwed over by everybody. But I had the system worked out where everyone got paid. I didn't. I just used the money that I would have made to pay for the venue, and then I would come up and do my jokes before the show, and then you know I would come in as the bands are setting up. To tell some jokes and introduce them. So I did that for 2 or 3 years all over the East Coast. And then I started to do more and more public speaking, which is basically stand-up comedy, except you get paid a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the only difference. And so, you know, I was at the United Nations and I went to Moscow and I was overseas in Wales and I was invited to do it over in like Malaysia, and I've been all over the country doing these. And I think the trick to it is to have confidence in your material. And I didn't have confidence until maybe 2014, just to give you an idea of how long it took. You know, like I was like 97, 98. I was like, all right, I'm making a lot of dick and fart jokes and this is fine. But I never really knew if it hit or not because you can never really tell, right? You don't feel confident in it until you've done enough shows. And so when I was in New Orleans, I did a stand-up / presentation, and the audience we were speaking 3 different languages. And so there was 3 different interpreters there that had to like interpret what I was saying. And when they all laughed at the same time, I knew that I was good at what I did. And so that, you know, it took a really long time to get to that point. But Once you have that, it's like the most refreshing thing ever, because then you could just walk on stage and not give a shit, and just do what you're going to do and not worry about your material bombing or not, because you have confidence in it. So I highly recommend doing an improv course first. I really think that everyone should do it. As from a like self-help perspective, I think that it's very freeing to do improv. It's very relaxing, as long as you don't get too wrapped up in your head about, oh my god, I need the next joke. Just doing it is just great experience, because one thing you'll find is, as you're doing stand up, you might have nights where you just don't want to tell the jokes that you had planned, and that's
Yeah.
happened with me quite a bit. Where it's like, all right, I don't want to, like with social media, I don't want to talk about social media anymore. And so I was just walking out there, and I was talking about like the Civil War for a good 10 or 15 minutes, and that was like my set. was was just talking about like how ridiculous it was and how everyone thought when it first started it was going to be like a big party. And so you had people from Washington going to Virginia with like picnic baskets, and they were bringing the family and the kids, and they were like, come on, we're going to watch a fight. And then of course it turned into like total chaos, and those people ran for their lives. And uh, taking an improv course just sort of opened me up a bit to just do that and switch gears.
I think what's fascinating, it will be one of my biggest takeaways from talking to you today is, yeah, just just go to a speaking event, be a public speaker, and you'll do stand up for more money. That's
Yeah,
that's
no,
amazing.
that's the big trick to it, because I think so. Here's what I found: you have a choice. You can eat shit as a stand-up comedian and travel the country and perform in front of like two or three people and not get paid because the owner decided to screw you out of your money, or you can find a topic to talk about that you're really knowledgeable on and get people to pay you, and then when you show up, you just do your set.
That's pretty amazing, and it makes a lot of sense. Like I would say I'm like I know a little bit of everything, a master of none type of deal, and I we just did for our first panel at a Comic-Con the other
Nice,
yesterday. Wait, was today Tuesday?
congratulations.
Thank you. Sunday, 2 days ago, whatever it was. And it was, it was really neat. And like, it's, for me, sitting around talking with friends is like I can't, my downfall with stand up, and that's why I want to go to improv, because it's more of a group activity. But I know my downfall with stand up is like the pressure of being up there on your own. And same thing with doing like really a speaking event. Like it's doing a panel on my own would be like, oh my god, I can't do it. And whenever I do my podcast live, like I make sure I bring my best friend with me, who just he sits there so that like I don't have to fail at telling jokes. I can just talk to him if I feel like we're failing. And so that, yeah, the panel was like, it was just, me and four friends, and we just sat around talking about Marvel, and it was super exciting. And it, obviously there's a lot of things I learned that we have to do differently, but like it's opened up this new path for me that I was like, all right, we're going to do panels all the time now.
Yeah, you totally should. I think I love panels just at the comic conventions in general, but I found that a lot of them don't put the work in. I'm trying to be polite. Like I'm trying to be like, they might just show up and be like, hey, here's a panel. And then you wasted your time going to it. But if you keep putting into working and doing more of it, and I think that's great. I think that's excellent, because then you'll put on a good show. That's all people really want. I mean, that's the trick to everything I do, right? It's all a big show. I joke about being an atheist. I joke about like my porn habits, but at the same time, I'm teaching you stuff about privacy and social media and all these other things. And so I think it's all about how much work you put into it. So if you keep practicing and keep at it, you'll do some great panels. And I'm excited for people to come check you guys out.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like last year I was like, oh, it'd be cool. Like, cause I had a friend who does a podcast, and he kind of created this video game show, and he was taking it to different like little small like not big city Comic Cons, and then he went to Wizard World, is one of the bigger ones that comes to Philadelphia, and he was there. I was like, wait a second, if he can do this at Wizard World, I can certainly go somewhere and talk for an hour, like at a little rinky dinky one. And that was like, all right, in 2017 I said 2018 we're going to do a panel, and we were able to do it. And it's definitely, we were underprepared simply because of like there was some miscommunication with like their automated system and emails not going out. So literally like the day of was like when things were really finalized. So it was like, all right, well, I have to throw out all this other stuff I kind of had in the back of my mind because I didn't prepare for it. But like I know now, like, okay, I need to bring XYZ, and I know that I want to do ABC at the next panel. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of grow in that aspect of it. And of like I don't want to say my public speaking events because I don't get paid what a public speaker should get paid. I like to just do like the live shows, just going around talking to friends basically in front of people who do not pay anything. So
well, everything counts.
Yeah.
I mean, everything counts. The more panels that you do, the more likely you are to be invited to do other speaking events on your own.
Well,
so they make it all built.
And if I'm being honest, the ultimate goal is to be the Philadelphia's version of Chris Hardwick. Like, I just want to moderate. Nice. I want to moderate panels. I want to talk about TV shows. If I get paid for it, great. But I just want to be that guy in Philadelphia, at least.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So, what now? You briefly mentioned it, and it rekindled my memory of reading something probably in like your Twitter bio. You do comics as well, like little web comics, right?
Yeah. So I have two. Well, I have one that's out on Comixology right now, and I have a self-help / memoir / batshit crazy funny comic book coming out in June. Which will also be on the Comixology, and both comics are there for $2.99 because I just feel weird charging more than that.
Oh, so they're not. So they're. I lowballed it. It's not a web comic. It's not that filth. It's actual. It's actual comic books.
Actual comics.
So are they available only digitally, or can you get them in print as well?
So the self-help one will be out in print. I'm still trying to figure out the logistics behind that. I used to do webcomics, so I spent since 2002 until about maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I did webcomics. So I certainly have a love and affection for that world. But yeah, these are the real deal. Vengeance Nevada is too expensive to put out in print.
Yeah.
The other thing is I self-fund all my books.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I'm very careful about the reason why like the self-help one is going to be printed and Vengeance Nevada is not is because I know I can sell the self-help book easily. Like I could just do all the traditional media that you would to sell a self-help book, except it's a comic book. Whereas with Vengeance Nevada, it's kind of like, I don't even know what's going to happen with us. So I put it out there and I'm kind of waiting to see what the sales are. And I should know in a month or so because they give you this stuff quarterly.
Cool. Yeah, it's I should say my comment about webcomics was a complete joke because I do love webcomics myself. Like I mean, I grew up on like news. God, I forget the what newgrounds.com where they had that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Penny Arcade and like Cyanide and Happiness. Just ones off the top of my head that I'm remembering. Yeah, and that was actually like we tried starting one ourselves like probably 15 years ago in the infancy of the web, or at least for us it was the infancy of the web. And it is a when you don't have any artistic ability, it is a very hard medium to get into. But yeah, I love the world of web comics and comic books and stuff. So that's really exciting to hear that not only did you start in web comics, but you got to digital / print and self-published is something that I'm really a fan of, like in this world, in 2018, just being like in new media, being able to produce your own content and not really have to worry about anyone else to put it out is like the coolest thing about technology.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because if you go back like 10, 15 years ago, if you said, I'm going to self-publish a book, people would be like, you're not good enough to get your book actually published. Whereas now, if you would self-publish a book, people are like, all right, fuck yeah, that's awesome. Because the publishing industry is too busy eating itself to really give all the people an opportunity that should get an opportunity. And so, yeah, that was kind of my mindset with putting both of these books out, where I was just like, I could pitch it to Image, I can go through an agent and do all the big shot stuff, but why? I keep most of the money. Yeah. If it's $2.99, Amazon gets, I think they get $1, and then I keep the rest. So why on earth would I give up the money to anyone else when I could just put it out on Comixology? It makes no sense. Aside from not having it in comic book stores, but even then, you have to deal with, I don't know if this is too in the weeds, but then you have to deal with Diamond, and you have to deal with like the comic retailers putting in the order in the right time, and if they don't do it, then your book doesn't get like there's so much shit you have to deal with to go through the appropriate channels. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I think it's great, but I just didn't want to do that. I just want to put out books and have fun. And so, being able to just self-publish in this day and age is great.
Yeah, and it is. I remember when my buddy who writes a fantasy series, when he published his first book, God, it's got to be. I feel like it's at least 10 years ago. When he published his first book, it was like he did it. He looked for traditional publishers, and obviously he got turned away a lot because he didn't have a real agent or anything. And he ultimately went through Amazon to self-publish. And he like felt dirty about it. I was like, oh, dude, that's rock and roll, man. Like I was, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. So like the idea of indie is like big for me, and it has been since, I'd say realistically, even though I've watched his films, in the late 90s, I became a super fan like in the mid 2000s. And ever since then I've always been like, I love indie, and I've been podcasting for over 10 years. Podcasting is like I think the definition of being an indie artist right now. Like it's the modern day indie filmmaker is an indie podcaster.
I mean, I'm the same way with Kevin Smith. He and I now have both. Well, he didn't quite have heart surgery; he had intervention. But he and I are both in that club now. So, so he and I have a lot in common these days. But yeah, I was a huge fan of his in the 90s. You know what's interesting though is that I completely lost my point. you know what it is I was thinking of Kevin Smith, and it started taking me on like a lot on the thought chain of weed, and then Fat Man on Batman, and then Mark Bernardin, and what a big fan I am of his. And I just completely lost where I was going with that. But yeah, no, I think being indie. Oh yes, all right, it's back. Okay, this is the example I give everybody. Metallica, which is the world's, at least for the past 40 years, the world's most successful touring musical act. How did they get their start? By handing out bootleg cassette tapes of them singing other people's stuff. That was the story of how Metallica got picked up. I mean, if that's how they started, there's no shame to self-publish something. There's no shame in doing your own podcast or anything. We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah. And it's, like I said, I mean, especially in like this day and age where it's never been easier to do all that stuff. Like it's so easy to get your voice out there, whether it be writing, podcasting, filmmaking, even. It's still probably the most expensive way to go with filmmaking, but it's all easier to do in 2018. And I'm such a fan of when people are like just self-made
I will take that as a compliment
of whatever they do.
My goal, very big on goal setting. So my goal for next year is to be completely self-sufficient, so that I'm bringing in money through like the comics and the audiobooks. And then I got like a short story thing that's going to go out on the Kindle this summer. And so if I can just be completely self-sufficient doing that, I will be absolutely thrilled.
Well, and I think what's interesting, and we'll kind of end on this note, is when I was looking, because I try to leave social media as the last resort to contact someone about doing an interview. I feel like it's slightly more professional to go through an email if I can. And so that's like one of the reasons I went to, like I hunted, went down the rabbit hole through your Twitter to your website and stuff. And I think it's super interesting that like you don't go through like an agent or a manager.
Yeah,
anymore,
I have
right?
those
Like you just kind of handle everything yourself as far as like you as a person.
Like I have an agent, but to me it's like what? Okay, amazing. So just to give you an idea of like timeline for stuff. So social media is bullshit. I started working on it in 2009, 2010, and I got an agent in 2011. It took a full year. I'm sorry, I got the agent in 2010. It took a full year of him and I going back and forth to get the proposal where we wanted it to send it to publishers. I was lucky it sold quickly, but then it was another year of writing it, and then another year of just sitting around waiting for them to release it. I could do that. That's fine. But why on earth would I do that when I could just put out an audiobook, which I did. So the audio version of The End of Privacy is, I published that myself. That wasn't put out by the privacy publisher over in the UK. Why can't I just do that, release it myself, and I make way more money? Like every time someone buys an audiobook, I make something like $8. which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at the royalties that you get from like traditional book sales or even from what I'm making when people buy Vengeance Nevada on Comixology, I'm making a ton of money off of just putting out that audiobook. So why on earth would I spend 2 years of my life going through the agent, going to the publisher, sitting around waiting, and then having to deal with all their edits and everything, when in a year's time I can put out a pretty good product on my own and just keep the money for myself.
Yeah, no, and that's, it makes a lot of sense. And it's not that I would say I would ever have the opportunity to have an agent at this point, because I've never gone beyond really podcasting. But it's one of the things that's like, why? Whenever I think about bigger projects, it's like, well, I'm gonna have to do this, this, and this. It's like, and I try to think back to like stories like yours or just my podcasting roots and my indie roots. Like, just do it yourself, man. Just so that's like, and that's always the biggest hurdle is all right, stop being lazy. That's the problem when you do it yourself. Is you're your own worst enemy at the same time. It's consistency
too. Like I found I have this list of like 10,000 podcasters that I had for another project, and I noticed that about 4,000 of them just dropped off the map. Like they just gave up about like a year in or 6 months in. They were like, this is stupid, and abandoned it. It's the people that show up every day and keep at it that succeed.
And what's awesome about podcasting is whenever I talk to like newer podcasters and whatnot, and like they say, yeah, we're just about to hit our 10th episode, we haven't been around long. I'm like, no, man, applaud that, because like every podcast that starts, if there's 1,000 of them that start episode 1, you're lucky if half of them even get to episode 10. And then from there, you're lucky if even half of those get to episode 50. So like, just the fact that you're episode 10 and like someone I was talking to hit episode 200, which I would say in the combined years of podcasting, I've obviously done more than that, but like I've never had a show of my own that I produced hit that number. Like I've always kind of just stopped or changed shows or took a break because of the kids. Like usually I think 150 episodes or 160 was like my high mark. And so like, I'm like, dude, take that 200 episodes. Like I'm more proud of you for hitting 200 than for me hitting 10 years. Cause I was inconsistent for 10 years. Right. So yeah, it's I love when people like when I get to talk to new podcasters, I just love like dropping that little science bomb on them about like podcasting facts. Cause I think it helps them continue on.
It does. I think it's very rewarding for them to hear that, because they don't often do.
Yeah. All right, BJ, what do you have coming out that you want people to know about? And then any social media or whatever, if you want to curse social media some more, where can people find you, not find you?
Best place is bjmendelson.com. They could just email me. I use, if you're into comic books and professional wrestling, particularly like women's professional wrestling, then it's okay to follow me on Twitter, because that's all I tweet about, and that's just at BJ Mendelson. But if you're not into those things, don't follow me. Don't waste your time. I give out my phone number. Honestly, I prefer people don't call me, but
oh God,
yeah. So so everyone listening, if you can text me the word sheetrock, which is spelled exactly as it sounds, sheetrock, and if you text it to 646-331 8341. Yes, that's my actual number. And yes, I actually do send everyone the book. There's no bot or automation or anything like that. It's 646-331-8341. That's the best way to reach me. And that's how I keep in touch with everyone, is they just send me a text and I text them back. And you know what? The reason why I do it, I think this is important, is that when you post something on social media, nobody really sees it. On Facebook, you got to pay for people to see it. On Twitter, they have an algorithm. On Instagram, there's an algorithm. So not as many people as you think are even seeing your posts. Whereas if you text me, I'll text you right back. It might take me a little bit, but I'm writing you right back, and I know that you're going to see it. So that's where people can find me. And the thing I want to promote is if you go to yourprivacybook.com, it'll take you to the Amazon page with two options, the audiobook and the print edition. It's yourprivacybook.com. And it's like $10. So hopefully people will check it out and enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with my comics, just go to bjmendelson.com.
Excellent, BJ. Thanks for doing the show. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I think the fact that we didn't talk about wrestling blows my mind. So next time you're on the show, that could be a whole rabbit hole we go down. My audience might be sick and tired of it, but you know what? Sometimes you just got to do an episode for you, So next time we'll have you on. We'll go down that rabbit hole and whatever other projects you have.
That'll be great.
Thanks for doing the show again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, big thanks to BJ Mendelson for being on the show. As he said, he'll text you back. He prefers text messaging as his preferred method of connecting with his fans. So text Sheetrock to 646-331-8341. Again, that's 646-331-8341. Text Sheetrock to that number, and not only will you get a free book, you'll also have instant connection to BJ Mendelson. And you can go to bjmendelson.com for everything that he's doing. And all the links and all these things that he's talked about will be in the show notes, of course. Again, real quick note, support us, man. Thank you. You already support us by listening to us. You're still here at the end of the show listening to this, to me just go on and on and on about things. And I thank you if you're still hanging out at the end of the show. You're a true fan, and I love you for that. And thank you for taking an hour or so out of your day and listening to us. You could be doing anything with this hour, and you chose to listen to Everything Is Awesome, to Kev, and to this week to BJ Mendelson. So thank you for that. If you can continue supporting this show to help us grow, I want to be quick with these 3 places that you can do that. Patreon.com/thatentertains. iTunes, 5-star ratings and reviews. Apple Math does wonders. And of course, word of mouth recommendations. Just you put it on when you have a friend in the car, tell a buddy about it. And we'd really enjoy that. And just a reminder, the Philadelphia Podcast Fest, Everything Is Awesome, will be performing on July 1st at 1 p.m. at the Tattooed Mom venue. We're kicking off the last day of the festival. I'm really, really excited about it. I'm in the process of booking the show now, so as we kick into the Philadelphia Podcast Festival celebration with these in the month of June, really, we'll have more announcements about our guests. So thank you for listening, and you know what? I haven't been awesome. You haven't been awesome. We've been awesome right here on awesomepodcast.com, part of the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening to the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Core Temp Arts shows, visit coretemparts.com.